I'm really excited to connect with Joao now that we've been to Portugal. As always, each country's before interview with the guests helps us understand what makes their home country special. After the trip, I like to connect with those guests for a few minutes, and then I'm joined by my friend Taylor for a more in-depth discussion of the experience we had in the country. On that note, let's get to the recap for Portugal with my friend Joao. Joao, welcome back to My Home is Special.
Happy to be back.
I think we talked a little bit before we started recording and maybe while I was on my trip, but we started in Porto and had some really great moments. It's a really walkable, people-friendly city. And I was curious, as somebody who I think is from Lisbon, have you been to Porto? And why didn't you tell me how cool it was when we talked the first time?
It's very cool. I have been many times. Actually, I proposed to Porto, so it's a very special city for me. And it has a number of beautiful spots. I guess it's probably an origin bias that I'm more familiar with Lisbon, and so those examples come to mind more often.
You know, we walked a little bit of it, and then I think on the second day we were there, we had a boat tour on the river. And that's when you really get to see Porto in all its glory, because the waterfront area with the colorful buildings and the promenade and all of that, it's just amazing. And it gave us a very different perspective on the city. So after the boat tour, we were excited to get out a little bit more and walk and just spend some time down there. It was really cool.
It's very vibrant, isn't it? All that waterfront, all the people. It's a very vibrant location.
Now, when we were there, it was a little bit colder than it typically is during the year, but it was still really nice out. And we did get some days of sun. And I admit, the very first time the sun came out, I just stopped dead in my tracks. And I'm not usually that guy. I've talked about this on the podcast before. I don't see a sunset and get all emotional. But the light in Portugal was different than anything we had seen. And when the sun came out, it was so vibrant and crisp that I tried to take pictures of it, but I'm not sure I captured it. How is that possible? It was even better than you described it.
But it is something that sticks in, at least in our memories, and when we were abroad, it's something we miss, and we notice the difference, especially in spring when the weather changes. Yes, the way that the light shines against the new leaves of the trees, which are very light green, it's something that sticks in your memory. It's part of the home memories.
Yeah, and I will include some photos that I took of the light, because there were a couple times where the sun was coming through the trees and you get like this little halo around each individual leaf. And there were these trees with these amazing purple flowers, and to get the light coming through
the jacarandas.
Yes. And they were everywhere. And I just kept stopping and taking pictures. And everybody who's followed my photography knows I don't do landscapes, I don't do architecture, but in Portugal I did both several times because of the light. Now, the other thing that you talked about was the pastel de nata. Now, I'm not a big fan of eggs or custard, but I did try it. I will say, by the way, the coffee was excellent. We did a coffee stop in Porto on a tour. The coffee was amazing. And it actually goes really well with the pastel de nata, because it does. Beyond sweet, Joao. Like, there's candy bar sweet.
It's beyond sweet. Yes, you don't need any sugar in your coffee if you're having the pastel de nata with it.
You absolutely do not. We went to a Supernova Coffee in Porto, which had some really strange art, but had some great coffee. And we stopped in Sintra and we stopped in Lisbon on our tour, and I had pastel de nata twice. I think I actually had it in my hotel as well. So I did try it. The other thing that I wanted to close the loop with you on was we went to the museum, and it was such a diverse range of art, of tapestries, of sculpture, of porcelain, of glass. It was far more diverse and honestly a lot larger than I thought it would be. And it was just this one guy's personal collection. I could see how you could spend so much time there.
Yes, and he had a number of interests. And so he collected from all over the world, all moments in time that he was interested in. And he kept on replacing his pieces by better pieces that he would find. And so it's a rather unique and I find beautiful collection.
Yeah, but the building itself and the grounds itself were just the kind of place you could spend hours in. And they had a cafe that was full of people eating lunch because they were clearly taking a break because they were going to go explore the rest of the museum. But you could spend a couple of hours looking at amazing paintings and then go grab a snack and then go back and look at amazing sculptures and tapestries from throughout history. And that was really neat. Now, we did get outside to enjoy the gardens a little bit. Like I said, it was a little bit chilly. I was surprised at how aggressive the ducks were. They were certainly accustomed to being near the cafe, I would say.
Yeah, they're very entitled, those ducks. Yeah, they've been around for a while. It's
I,
their ground.
I actually saw a woman grab lunch and go sit out on the grass with her laptop, presumably to work. And after about 2 minutes of me watching her fight off these ducks, she had to go move, I think, to a table because they just would not leave her alone.
Yeah, if she has food and she's on the ground, hey, it's fair game for the ducks.
You said you better come a little closer. Now, I have one final question for you. We went to see a football game, soccer game for those in the U.S., at Dragon Stadium in Porto, and they had a wall of bricks who I think were patrons of the stadium or fans from the opening night, and they had hundreds of names on all these different bricks. And at eye level, while we were on the tour, I noticed one that said Joao Soares. And I have to ask, was that you? Are you a benefactor of the Porto Stadium?
No, it wasn't me. It's not that unusual a name. And so it wasn't me. But it's funny that you actually stood in front of a Joao Soares brick. That's how funny that can you get.
Well, I will add a copy of that brick, maybe with a caption of your disclaimer, and pictures of the pastel de nata, pictures of the light, and pictures from the museum to the post with this podcast. But I just wanted to get back with you and say thank you for sharing and helping us set the tone and direction for what we wanted to experience when we were in Portugal. It made a huge difference for us and made Portugal a really special stop for me, my wife, and our sons who joined us for that week. So thank you.
That's awesome. I'm really glad, Keith. And it is a pleasure to be a part of these journeys and help inspire in a little way on what I call home. So really glad you enjoyed it.
Drops fall on the window down the hall, because the morning dew. And darling, when the morning comes and I see the morning sun, I wanna be the one with you, just the two of us.
Keith, I'm back. I am so excited to be back and finally be able to talk about Portugal, which I've been very interested in my own travels for myself. So let's jump right in. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
So one really cool thing that I wanted to start off talking about was on your Instagram story, you actually posted a picture of, was it your great grandfather? And he's from Portugal and
Yeah.
he's a sugar mill engineer?
Yeah, my mom's grandfather, who she never met, actually. Her father passed away when she was very young, and she never met her grandparents. But my mom's grandfather was a white Portuguese sugar mill engineer, which led to a whole bunch of interesting conversations when I saw his picture and knew where he was.
That's actually, so you have a direct connection to Portugal.
I do. And coming from Ghana, we talked about, did it feel like you were coming home? And I said, not really. But, we saw some people that looked like they could be relatives. I actually have Portuguese blood. My mom's grandfather, who she never actually met, was a sugar mill engineer, and he went to the Caribbean, either in St. Croix or the Dominican Republic, and worked on a sugar plantation. And it led to a bunch of interesting conversations because he's a white Portuguese man, and he was working on a sugar plantation. And so we had this awkward conversation where I was trying to figure out if my great-grandfather actually owned slaves. As far as we can tell, he did not, but he worked on a sugar plantation. And my grandmother was born in St. Croix and went to the Dominican Republic, and she met my grandfather, and they came to New York. My grandfather was undocumented, but basically got off the boat as a merchant marine and stayed. And the boat left, and he stayed behind in Harlem, and that's where my mom was raised. But our roots on that side of the family are definitely tied to Portugal, and so in some ways it was a homecoming, although I admit I don't feel any type of connection to it in that sense.
That's actually a really cool story and a really cool way to just start the concept of your trip, the idea that you have that direct connection. And I know you had some special guests on this trip, right?
That's right. This was the first trip since COVID that the four of us took a trip outside the country. We've been around in the U.S. a little bit, but they came over for a week in Portugal. So we all traveled on my birthday in May and met up the day after my birthday at the airport in Porto.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank
And
you.
what was your plan for this trip as a family? It's your first time really being able to spend time as a family, and now they're adults, right?
We've traveled a lot as a family, so they kind of just roll with it. We didn't have to give them a rundown on everything we're doing and how to pack. We wanted to make sure they didn't forget their passports because one was coming from California. He met up with the other one in New Jersey, and then they hopped over together. And then we were coming from Ghana. So we actually sort of all rendezvoused at the airport, and luckily travel worked out well. But we really didn't have a plan. They are big soccer fans, international football fans, and they follow pretty much every league. And we figured we would do some of that. They were there with us from Saturday to Saturday. The 2 Sundays there were the last 2 weeks of the regular season for the Portuguese league. So we knew we'd go to the games and do some stadium tours, but we really didn't have much else planned.
So did you actually get to go to like a game while you were there together as a family?
That was really neat. We've been to a couple of games here in the U.S., and the opportunity to go to a European soccer game in Europe was really awesome. So we took full advantage of that. And we ended up going to a game in Porto, and they were playing Boa Vista. And I don't know either team. The boys obviously did. But they were playing their hometown rivals. So it was like a Cubs Sox thing or a Mets Yankees thing. So Boa Vista and Porto are both based in Porto, and they were playing each other on the last regular season game. And we looked at the stadium name, and it was actually Porto's home stadium that they were playing at. So Porto was on the left, Boa Vista was on the right when you look at the lineup for the day. And we went, and the whole stadium was blue and white. But the fun part of it was that there was a section in the upper deck, and it was probably 2 or 3 sections. They were above us, so we couldn't see how big it was. But it was all the Boa Vista fans. So the whole stadium is blue and white Porto fans. And then there's a couple sections in the upper deck that's Boa Vista. And those people dominated the stadium. You could hear them singing from the minute the game started to the minute the game ended. They were singing, they were chanting, they were just going bananas up there. And the home crowd was just quiet the whole time. It was totally crazy. Like they let this small group of away fans just dominate the stadium's atmosphere.
That would be like the Cubs coming and dominating the Sox stadium. That would never go well here. And you said the home team was on the left?
Yeah, so when we looked at it, we figured that Boa Vista was the home team because they were on the right when you looked at the listing. And when we got there, we saw everybody in blue and white. They had their anthems, so everybody stood up like they was playing the Portuguese national anthem. But I think it was Porto's team song or something like that. And it was a really good game. For what it's worth, Boa Vista went up 1-0 after tons of missed chances for Porto. And then Porto came back and scored 2 goals at the end. I didn't feel like their fans deserved it because they were like totally not into it the whole game. And then they won. So I was happy for them, but I don't feel like they earned it as a fandom.
That doesn't sound like the typical fandoms you see when you're looking at, international football games on TV. That's very interesting and a very different perspective of a football game than I've heard.
No, the Boa Vista fans, now they earned the win. They were working the whole time, and I'm sure most of them left without their voices, although I'm sure they were drinking and may not remember the game. But, we went back to the stadium the next day for a stadium tour, and it was really cool for us to check that out because a lot of the club teams I didn't realize, like Boa Vista or Porto, or most people are familiar with FC Barcelona or Real Madrid. I didn't realize that a lot of them are sports clubs, and so they have teams in every sport. Porto has the soccer team that we saw, but they have a swimming team. They have a rugby team. They have a basketball team. They have a volleyball team. And it's like a sports club that just has multiple sports. That was really neat. And so the museum that they had at the stadium after the tour was on the whole Porto club sports history, which I had no idea goes back, decades, probably over a century, and just covered a lot of stuff. So it was a really informative way to start the trip. And for the boys, rather than dragging them to all these historical sites and walking them forever, which we did later, starting with a proper European soccer game and then spending another afternoon at the stadium doing the tour was a great way to get started, Taylor.
Sounds like it, Keith. So you said the Porto fans were really quiet. So what was the vibe like overall for just people within the entire country or within the city, period? What was the vibe like of the people?
I don't want to overgeneralize. Like we've done a pretty good job of, Taylor. I saw 2 places in a country that has millions of people in several cities. So I don't want to over extrapolate from what I saw, but it was really chill. Joao said that, and he compared Portugal to Spain in the sense that, the Spaniards will come to a restaurant and be all boisterous and loud, and the Portuguese will sort of get even quieter. And it was like that. Even when it was crowded, like we went to restaurants and things like that, it was still really chill. And I can really appreciate what Joao was talking about, because we're kind of a chill family. Like, we're not the table that's like raising a ruckus in the restaurant. We don't have our phones out when we're at the table, so we're talking with each other, but we're kind of chill about it. And the whole vibe was like that. And we did a lot of walking. There were some street vendors, but not a ton. They weren't aggressive. And everyone we met was nice about everything, like whether it was the boats or we were on a tour or we were at a restaurant or we were buying snacks. And I really wouldn't contrast it with any other place we had been, but I would say you just can go to Portugal and chill, like you can relax. And even people from the cultures that I know were just really chill. We were eating dinner on one of our last nights there outside, and just out of nowhere, these dudes just roll up with a speaker, set up, and start breaking. And so next thing you know, I excuse myself from the table, grab my camera, and I'm like sitting out on the sidewalk while the family's eating dinner. And I'm literally sitting on the ground, taking pictures, taking selfies with them, seeing who we know in common. And of course, we knew some people in common. And then Taylor, 10 minutes after they started, they picked up their speaker and walked on. It was like they just appeared out of nowhere so I could take their pictures during dinner. And then they left and went on to the next spot. It was awesome.
I know your family was like, how does he always manage to find them wherever he goes?
Well, Malcolm thought it was funny. KJ rolled his eyes, and Tasha just sighed, because everywhere we go, remember we saw the MCs in Bolivia, we went to the B-boy battle in Vietnam. Everywhere we go, even when we were in Senegal, like we're just rolling around, and next thing you know, there's some B-boys there, and I just hop out and start talking. So as soon as they showed up and hit play on the music, Tasha knew I was leaving the table, and that now they were having dinner for 3. But it was fun, and it's just, that community just continues to reinforce what's so great about it. Remarkably humble artists that are part of a global community that enjoy connecting with each other and sharing their art with each other. And so they danced, I took pictures, we swapped email addresses and kept it moving. It was awesome.
As usual, you always know how to find a good time to keep.
It was fun, Taylor.
I'm begging you.
So, did you get to do any touring? I know you said you got to see 2 cities. What was the other one you got to see?
Tasha and I connected to Porto through Lisbon, but then we took the train back to Lisbon. And a friend of mine who was reading one of the email newsletters that I sent out said, oh, if you're going to Lisbon, you've got to connect with Pats. Pats does great tours, and she'll customize them for whatever you want. So I emailed Pats and was like, hey, we're coming to Portugal next week. We're going to be in Lisbon, and we really don't have a plan. What would you do? And unlike most lazy tour guides, Pat's actually sent us a whole questionnaire of what we like to do as a family, with some options of things that we can do, what we're into outside of these travels, and kind of what we had in mind for the day. And I already said I didn't have a plan. So I emailed her back and was like, we like to do these types of things. We don't like to do those types of things. We're not shoppers. We're not trying to go to a bunch of stores and see a bunch of that kind of stuff. We want to get out of the touristy parts of the city and get into a neighborhood and see some things. And then she basically requires a 20 or 30-minute phone call to interview and talk with both of us about what she's planning for the day. And she put together an 8-hour plan that had us walking through all these neighborhoods in the city. And we started at a really cool spot. We basically skipped the tourist stuff. She pointed us to it and was like, you can go there tomorrow on your free day. But with me, we're going to go into the neighborhood and we're going to see some sites and visit some museums and attractions that most tourists don't go to. And so we met with her at like 9 in the morning and we were walking with Pats all day.
So you walked for 8 hours straight through the city?
Pretty much. That's kind of what Tasha does to us all the time, if I can blame her, since she's not willing to come on the podcast to defend herself. But yeah, I mean, we stopped for lunch and we stopped for snacks and we stopped at other places where we could sit. But Pat's took us on an awesome tour of the city. And she even had Tasha pose with some of her merch, and we're on her Instagram feed, which was really awesome.
And what were some of the cool stops that you guys got to make that were local, or at least maybe different, that you think the listener should hear about?
We started at a monument overlooking a garden, and it was one of my favorite pictures from the city. And she took us to a bunch of other sites. Like there was a water museum that had, I think it was a Roman aqueduct system and a big pool and some other stuff that they were using for water for this particular neighborhood, several centuries ago. And we got to see some places to eat. She had what she considered the best chocolate cake in the city she wanted to take us to. We went to get some pastel de nata, like Joao talked about. And we also got to some of the parks. And like I said, for us, it's not necessarily that there's something to see as much as it is something to immerse yourself in. So just walking through the neighborhoods and seeing things and having her point out important buildings or statues was cool. And again, just seeing how people are living their lives. One of the coolest things we did, though, Taylor, was we stopped at a cemetery. And it was neat to see how people did it back then, kind of like preparing for the afterlife, which we saw a little bit of in Egypt, which we'll talk about in a few episodes. But we're walking through and people are building these massive monuments to themselves. You know, they have their photo engraved in stone and all these other massive things, kind of like the cemetery we visited in Buenos Aires, where Eva Perón was buried. But she said, hey, I want to show you this pyramid. We were like, okay, like somebody built a pyramid for their tombstone, whatever. And I was expecting like the typical 10-foot high sort of structure with the body inside or whatever they do. And we turn the corner and KJ goes, holy crap. I'm like, KJ doesn't get animated about anything. So I turn the corner. Taylor, this dude built a giant ass pyramid on this private plot in the cemetery. And I mean, it was probably 30 or 40 feet high. And
wait, what?
Yeah, it was Taylor. He built a pyramid in the cemetery. And what was crazy was you go up these steps and there's like this avenue, sort of maybe 50 feet long, about 50 feet long, leading to the entrance to this pyramid. But on either side of the avenue, he buried all of his servants. And Taylor, this isn't like thousands of years ago. I don't know when this dude passed away, but it wasn't that long ago. But he buried all of his servants. And I think it was like men on one side, women on the other. And there's probably like, I don't know, a dozen tombstones lining the avenue to his pyramid. And what was fascinating was when we went to Egypt, that's how the actual pyramids are. Like they have these causeways leading to the pyramids with other stuff on either side of them. And this dude built that for himself in this cemetery in Lisbon. It was bananas.
So he went to Egypt and got all of this, I guess, inspiration and decided that Lisbon and this cemetery was a great place to do this? Okay.
You know, Taylor, I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money. But again, if you pass away with enough money to do something like that, maybe you should think about something a little more modest and putting your money to people who can really use it. That's just me. But after seeing the pyramids and seeing all the other things around the world of these massive burial monuments that people make to themselves, I guess he had centuries of inspiration versus one man sitting in Chicago's opinion.
I will go ahead and agree with your opinion on that as well. So just add me to it.
Will do.
You've seen some really cool stuff, like the cemetery. You've got to walk for 8 hours with an amazing tour guide. And Lisbon sounds really great, but I haven't heard much of you talk about history or anything like that. Was that something that you guys got to do? You usually talk about or learn about the history of the country or the place.
That's a good question, Taylor. We didn't do a lot of things to like see the history, so to speak. Like there's probably some ruins that we could have made our way to in some other places, but we actually just wanted to chill and spend some time with the boys. You know, Tasha and I have been traveling the world and seeing a bunch of different things, but this was vacation for the boys. They wanted to relax. So we were like, let's just go to a game. And if we start every day at noon because they want to sleep in, fine. And if we want to just have lunch and chill, also fine. So, you know, we did the boat ride on the river, like talked about with Joao, and we did the museums and we did some other stuff, but we also just wanted to chill. And if we get back to the hotel and just want to sit for a few hours and chill, that's okay. One of the things we did want to do, though, was do a day trip to a town called Sintra, which is nearby Lisbon. It's probably about 45 minutes, 2 hours away, depending on traffic. And sometimes things don't go as planned. We've had luck with most of the guides that we had, but I wouldn't say this was one of those days. A little bit like when we were in Chile and our guide for Valparaiso just basically wasted a day of our trip and didn't really show us much of anything. At least this guy took us to all the sites, but he wasn't really a guide. He was like a driver. So we basically overpaid because I probably could have just booked an Uber to take me from point to point, and they would have shared just as much history and context as our, quote, guide did. But what was really wild was that about 10 minutes outside of Lisbon on the way on the highway, I was looking at all the street art because that's what I do. And I saw a painting from an artist named Atomico. Now, Atomico paints these it's like this orange with a big smile on its face. I recognize his art because I've seen it a bunch. I was showing some artists some pictures that I took from Miami when I was down there, and they were like, oh, that's Atomico. I was like, oh, cool. And then I started seeing Atomico's work everywhere. I've now seen his work in South Africa. I saw his work when I was doing a street art tour in Havana, and I've seen it elsewhere in Europe. And now I saw his work in Portugal. That was actually one of the highlights of the day going to Sintra, was seeing this guy's art on the highway, because I basically collect pictures of his art all over the world. But we were actually headed to Sintra for the day, and Sintra was really great. It had the castles, it had the estates. We tried some pretty cool snacks and pastries. But what was funny to me was everywhere in the world, men, mostly men, feel the urge to build these massive monuments to themselves. Like we talked about the pyramid, but even when they're alive, it's a thing. Today, I guess billionaires want to build the biggest yacht because they just have too much money and they don't know what to do with it. But there's like this old estate, and I think it was a castle back in the day. And at some point, this private buyer just bought it and decided to turn it into like his home. And I don't know if it was his permanent home or his summer home, but it was just like this giant castle, like this massive estate. And it was just privately held. And this was where this dude lived. Sintra is definitely worth a day trip. And it was neat for us to get out and just see like a third city in the country. There's certainly more to see in Portugal, so I wouldn't be surprised if we're back at some point. But we did get outside of Lisbon and see a little bit of that.
It sounds like this was just a real vacation for you as a family. And that was really the focus for you guys, just spending the time together, even if it was a little bit different or even sometimes not what you exactly expected.
Yeah, after a week and a half in Ghana, seeing a bunch of things, sweating it out, eating like lunatics, just a regular vacation, like a normal family, was great. Because on the back end of this, we were headed to Greece, we were headed to Egypt, and we knew we were going to be running for essentially the next 3.5 weeks. Just taking time to relax in Lisbon was great, and Joao did not exaggerate. People were super chill and left us alone and let us just enjoy the time together as a family. And that's exactly what we did, Taylor. That's exactly what we did.
Sounds like you relaxed a lot when it came to Portugal and just overall really got to spend some time with your family.
Yep.
But I know that you have a story. Something happened in Portugal that you're like, I got to share this at Grown Folk Stories. I've got to share this on stage. So, for our wonderful listeners who may not get to attend Grown Folk Stories with us, what is the story that you're ready to share with us?
Taylor, I mentioned in Porto, because the boys are big international soccer fans, we went to a game the day after we arrived on Sunday night, and then Monday afternoon we had tickets to tour the stadium in Porto. They sort of do a behind-the-scenes tour. You get to go on the field, and then they have a museum. When we got to Lisbon, we couldn't stay for the game that following Sunday because we were leaving Saturday, but we wanted to go to the stadium and do that tour. So we bought tickets to the Benfica Stadium tour, and it was a really cool tour as well. Similar to Porto, it's a club that has all kinds of sports and a lot of history, and the boys know a lot of the players. So you just walk around and just, I wouldn't say I'm a diehard Benfica fan, but it was cool to just see that aspect of the culture because they are soccer crazies over there. Now, our plan on our last night there, Friday night, was to go back down to the main part of the city where some of the tourists are and just grab dinner by the water. So we call an Uber, and there's a line of cars to get into the parking lot outside the stadium where we were. He is texting me and he's like, I'm here, but I'm stuck in traffic. So we get in the car and he goes, yeah, there's a game tonight, which is why everybody's crowding the stadium. And we go, tonight? I thought the game was Sunday. He goes, no, they moved the game from Sunday to Friday. And so we thought, oh crap, like we really want to go to another game if we could. And he said, oh yeah, this is my favorite team and they're playing tonight. I'm sure of it. And that's what's going on. You know, it's probably like 4 or 5 o'clock, Taylor. We check and sure enough, the game was moved from Sunday to Friday. And we look and, you know, there's the team they were playing on the left and Benfica on the right in the listing. And we're like, wow, that's awesome. So as the car's pulling away, KJ and I are on the ticket website and we're looking and it says, you know, less than 1% of the tickets left for the game. It starts at 7:30. And tickets are like 40 or 50 euros. So it's not crazy expensive, like trying to get to an NBA game here in the US. You know, it's not cheap, but it's not prohibitively expensive. So we're like, well, screw dinner. Let's go to the game. He starts driving. KJ can't get the tickets because it won't let him buy 4. So he needs to buy 2. I need to buy 2. And in between all of that, I'm changing the Uber plan so he can stop at the hotel so I can put my backpack and my camera gear in because I can't bring it to the game. And then I changed the stop from the restaurant by the waterfront to a restaurant in the mall by the stadium. So we're like, we'll just go to the food court. I'll throw my bag at the hotel. We'll go to the food court. We'll eat. So KJ buys the tickets. I buy 2 tickets. Ticketmaster does its thing. So by the time the 40 euro tickets are purchased, they probably cost about 60 euros. So we're in for about 230, 240 euro, which isn't great, but we're excited that we get to go to a second game. And this is another really good team. So I throw my bags at the hotel. He drops us at the mall. We go into the food court. Food has been pretty expensive because the boys are ordering drinks, they're ordering steaks. Like they're living it up on mom and dad. I'm really excited that this time Tasha and I get to eat like falafel in the food court and the boys go to Burger King. So we save a ton of money on dinner, but we just spent a bunch of money on the game. So we eat in the mall and then we're going across the street to the stadium. It's like a 10-minute walk. We go over to the stadium, Taylor, and it's like a ghost town. And we're like, it's 6:30. The game's supposed to start in an hour. Where is everybody? So we're walking around and we're like, maybe they're all inside already, which makes no sense. That's the stupidest thing we've ever thought. So we go in there and then Malcolm looks it up and goes, guys, this is an away game. And then I remembered, oh crap, they put the home team on the left. So when I looked at the listing, Benfica was on the right and I was like, oh, well, that's a home game. And our Uber driver just told us, like, it's my favorite team. They're here tonight. That's what the traffic is. And it wasn't that. It was just traffic. I'm thinking to myself, whatever. It's a little bit more expensive. We'll just take an Uber. Where's the other stadium? Portugal's a relatively small country. So Malcolm, as I'm looking up, the things, Malcolm pulls it up faster and goes, it's 4 hours away. Now, Taylor, we're 45 minutes from game time and the game is 4 hours away. So we're definitely not going to the game. KJ and I are like, well, let's dump the tickets since there were so few of them left. I think we paid, I said 40 with all the markups. So we listed them for 30, but now we're like 30 minutes to game time because Ticketmaster isn't letting me list my tickets. So KJ gets his up. I need to somehow transfer my tickets to him so he can post them on his account. And after like 30 minutes of screwing around, it's like 5 minutes to game time. We finally get the tickets listed, but of course, nobody's buying tickets to a game 5 minutes to game time. So when all was said and done, Taylor, KJ ended up marking the tickets down to 7 euros each. And he sold them. We got $12 for each pair of tickets by the time Ticketmaster or StubHub took their fees. And we had to call an Uber and go back to the hotel. We ended up going back to the hotel and watching the game with the sound off in the hotel lobby.
Oh.
So we paid about 240 euro to watch this game on a big screen TV in silence in the hotel lobby. And KJ summed it up best when he said the only thing that would have made this better is if the same Uber driver had picked us up to bring us back to the hotel. Now, he didn't. But Taylor, how many stars do you give an Uber driver when he makes that kind of a mistake? He was a good driver, but he was a terrible advisor in terms of tickets. That's how we ended up spending our last night in Portugal, paying 240 euro to watch a game in the hotel lobby. Not my finest moment as a travel planner, but at least I got a good story out of it.
You've had some pretty interesting travel feats. I think this one might be on the cusp of one of the funniest / saddest ones that you've told yet.
For the most part, our travels have been pretty smooth, and every once in a while things go wrong, and sometimes they go wrong in a funny way.
Now I know, do not take travel advice from an Uber driver.
Man, and remember, home team on the left, home team on the left.
Home team on the left.
Amen. Well, Taylor, thanks for letting me chat with you a little bit about Portugal. We are going to talk about Greece next, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about that as we continue on the recap journey. It's good to see you again.
So excited, and I'm so thankful that you let me be a part of this journey. I can't wait. Let's go.
Thanks for listening to this episode of My Home is Special. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get future episodes automatically. Go to myhomeisspecial.com for the occasional email update too. That's where links to photo galleries and a few other surprises will live. Be sure to follow KBev Photo on Instagram for behind-the-scenes footage during our journey, and it'll be in the stories. If you just want the photos, go to kbevphoto.com. There's a lot else on there to explore. For now, this is Keith, aka KBev, signing off. Peace.